Mike, check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and only a fool believes his own lies. Now, a lot of people throughout the year have made the comment, and I've read it in articles and I've seen it on comments, even on my videos and other videos, that this generation and the generations to come will no longer care about original gaming hardware, that they're no longer going to care about original consoles like the Game Boy. They're no longer going to care about the original N64. There are a lot of comments that are saying that the future generation will either A, only care about the games of that current generation, so like the PlayStation 5 and on, or they'll only be interested in things like emulation and things like like a Retron 5 or other devices that may allow them to play some original hardware, or rather some games, but just not on the original consoles. And this talk has been hurled from left to right all across the internet, where you just hear both sides of the camp. And I've always been of the opinion that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Now, there was recently an article that was put out by MSN Today that basically highlighted the fact that the article said that you may have a fortune sitting in your attic, and they were talking to pretty much all of the readers who may have something like an original Game Boy just sitting somewhere in their attic. And they highlighted the fact that these games and these consoles could be potentially worth a lot of money, if sold on if sold on the secondary market. And we as gamers, we as collectors, we know that there is some truth to that. Is it a fortune? No, but I guess it depends on how much of this stuff you have. I recently saw a video from RNG Gamer where he talked about how his collection was worth roughly around $150, and he used his collection to leverage his way into a home purchase via an insurance quote from an insurance company that stated the value of his collection. Now, I don't know if that's a path that all retro gaming collectors want to go down. But according to him, it is something that is very doable if you do have a physical collection. And it does somewhat substantiate the notion that there is this monetary value to video game collections. Now, if you're a person who's sitting in a basement with thousands and thousands of games and using retro video games as your, I guess, somewhat of your investment vehicle, that is not going to be the wisest decision you can make, especially if you don't have other investments. Now, RNG Gamer sounds like a guy who's pretty diversified. Clearly, he owns a home, so he's into real estate. I'm not sure if he has stocks or bonds, and it sounds like he has gainful employment. So he's sounds like he's a diversified individual. But if you're a person whose total net worth is hinged on how many games you have in your basement, that really isn't the wisest thing that I would say. And I definitely wouldn't view it as a fortune, because the worth of things is great, and there's no problem with that. But there's one key word when it comes to value. When we start talking about the value of things and how much stuff is worth, the key word is liquidation. And for those of you who may not be familiar with what liquidation is how fast you can convert the value of something into actual usable cash that you can use to go and buy something else. And we see this all the time with pickup videos and collection videos and game hunting videos, where a lot of YouTubers will stress the value of a game or the value of their pickups. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that value isn't actually realized until you liquidate those games, until you sell those games and convert them into cash. And converting video games into cash isn't always a guarantee. It's a lot like the stock market, or it's a lot like Bitcoin. A lot of times guys will go on their brokerage accounts, they'll look at their Bitcoin, and they'll feel really happy because they see that the value of their Bitcoin has shot up, it's gone up, it's, the value is there. But if too many people tried to sell their Bitcoin at one time, what would happen is the institutions would actually shut it down. You wouldn't actually be able to sell if too many people tried to sell at the same time, because it would in effect collapse the entire market. And so there's always levels of difficulty. I say all that to say that there's levels of difficulty when you try to liquidate anything. No one can liquidate billions of dollars worth of stock in one day. Just the markets wouldn't allow it. However, if you did need to, let's say, I don't know, convert some of your stock into $20,000 or $50,000 worth of cash, it'd probably be a lot easier to convert $150,000 worth of stock into usable cash than it would be to convert $150,000 worth of video games into cash, which is why the best way that you could use it in terms of looking at it from a monetary value is to simply leverage it the way RNG Gamer described. Because the reality of it is that your video games are not a fortune unless you can convert them into some type of usable cash. So for all the people who do have a basement stacked with thousands and thousands of games, even if your collection is worth $1 million, the value of that collection means absolutely nothing if you do not have a reasonable way to liquidate that. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of ways that you could sell a lot of games at one time. You have a lot of YouTubers who do resell on places like Amazon and so on and so forth. And I've seen people buy collections worth $50,000. I've seen YouTubers buy collections worth $100,000. But those are few and far between, and that's really dependent on the type of economy that we're in. And I don't think going into 2025, there is a long list of individuals who will be willing to buy or even have the ability to buy 10, 20, 50, $100,000 worth of games all in one shot. So the article is misleading in some ways, but it creates this idea for the next generation, right? To have some type of incentive to get into retro gaming. And I think a big part of what draws the next generation into retro games is the value proposition. It's the perfect combination of an amazing hobby, a true interest that a lot of people enjoy. There are a lot of people who just genuinely love video games, but when you add that value factor, the idea that you could somehow get rich or make money off of video games, it just makes it a proposition just too intriguing to pass up. And I think all of those factors is going to be a big part of the reason why moving forward, there is always going to be a certain segment of the generations to come that will find some interest in retro video games. The same way that there will always be a generation that has a love for classic cars, or has a love for vinyl records, or has a love for paintings. There are paintings that have been painted hundreds of years ago, yet you still have people today spending millions of dollars on these paintings that are old or that are ancient. It's because there will always be that segment of the population that has an interest and will cause that hobby, that art piece, that game, that console to have some level of value. Now, on the flip side of that coin, there are some people who have absolutely no desire to get involved in physical hardware, neither from a collecting, gameplay, nor value standpoint. There are some people who would rather collect stocks. They'd rather collect Bitcoin than collect video games as a way of, I guess, preserving value. And so I think for the folks who say that the next generation will have absolutely no desire to get into retro gaming, there is some truth to that. So, I mean, ultimately, it's like I said, I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And to take a stance, to take an absolutist stance that it's going to be absolutely one way or the other would be absolutely false. I think that if there's any wrong thought process, that is the wrong thought process, because there's no absolutes. And if you don't believe me, go look up any video that talks about retro game collecting hardware, and you will see people on both sides of the fence every single time. There will be people who will say let's put digital or digital isn't the way to go. And then you'll have a lot of people who will say, um, digital is the best way to go. Everyone's circumstance is different, but I think the more we see articles like the one from MSN that highlight the fact that retro games are a fortune, quote unquote, and have this monetary value, you'll always have someone who's interested in it because people will always be interested in money. And look, at the end of the day, retro games are valuable. They do have value, and that value is there, but it's only good when you convert it into cash. It only means something when you make it real. And I'll end on this. I remember when I first started getting into stocks and I started trading um, and like buying stocks and things like that. I remember I sat with a stockbroker who sat me down and he said, remember to always make it real. At some point, always make it real. And what he was basically saying was, you know what, at some point in your there are going to be points in your investment journey where you have to take profits, basically turn it into cash and make it usable, turn it into something that you can actually use. And around this time of year in December is usually when you see a lot of investors take profits. This is why a lot of times you'll see the stock market go down. And I'm not a stock guru, I don't know a ton about stocks, but I do know that at a certain point in the year, investors usually like to take profits. They want to take out some of the cash and actualize some of that cash that they have invested in the stock market. And when you got a lot of guys selling, what happens? The stock market typically goes down, but everything happens in cycles. And then usually you'll see folks buy back in, and they may buy into different industries or buy into different segments of the market. But that's just the way it is. And I think the same could be said for retro video games. You will have guys who will have a collection worth $50,000. You'll see them put up a video how they sold $50,000 to go buy a car, or they sold $50,000 to take a vacation to Hawaii, or they sold $50,000 of their collection to fix their home. It's all it is what it is. But I would say do what you enjoy, do what you love. Don't get into video games for the value. Don't get into video games for the money, because there's a lot of other better ways you could spend your money and invest your money that's safer and will allow you to liquidate easier. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Do you think that the current generation will only be drawn to retro games because of the value and because of the money proposition? Or do you think this next generation will have a genuine love and build their own nostalgic memories with original hardware like we did as kids? I'm interested to know your thoughts. That does it for me for now. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.